If this isn't on off, turn it counterclockwise so it's off. If this isn't turned full counterclockwise, turn it full counterclockwise so it stops. It hits a little stop, and then it stops counterclockwise. So that's full counterclockwise to off. Next step, go up to the capillary tube. There's 2 screws that hold it. Those 2 screws need to be loosened so that we can remove the capillary tube. And then just go like that. 2 Phillips screws. Loosen them. Loosen this top. You can keep the 2 screws in. Just take them to the point where it's loose enough on the bracket that you could actually pull the tube down. So you pull the capillary tube carefully down out of it, and that's that guy. And he feeds through the wall, through that little hole right here. And that goes to the back of the unit where the thermostat's located. So what we do is we remove this tray, get it out of the way, and now this guy comes out from the back. We usually straighten him out so we can take out the tube from the back end. Okay, the tube comes out from right over here, and there's a little piece of clay that I took off that's stuck on this little hole here, and you simply fish the capillary tube out from there. Just use a screwdriver, pull up, and then carefully pull the capillary tube out through the hole. The clay that I took out from the little puka over here. So it was just hand pushed onto this hole. It just sticks on there like Play-Doh. So that's what you got to take out. Remove that, then you can pull out that tube like I just did. And then all we're doing is fishing this guy out through the back, out of the way. Just coil him up, coil the capillary tube up, and we can get working on the thermostat. Just get him out of the way here. So usually there's this plastic piece that sits over here. It simply gets pulled out. You just pull it out. It's just sitting in here, wedged up between the thermostat and this gas fitting. So you just pull that out. It comes out. These electrical wires are just sitting on here. They just come up like that. And then you've got a ground wire at the top of the thermostat you got to take off. So we just take that guy off. Take that off. Now that that's off, what we got to do is we got to remove the thermostat by pulling it out that way. So what I usually do is this is the fuel selector. You pull the fuel selector, and you can do this, pulling that little guy backwards, and then it loosens up from this fin here. And then you can move this out of the way now. Then we can pull this entire fitting that way, because it pulls out that way so that this can move that way and pull out from the gas fitting. Simply loosen. Let me grab a screwdriver. Next step is to just remove this screw right here. Goes down. This comes out. Next step is to remove these 2 screws. They hold this entire bracket up against the frame. There's another retaining collar right under here that we have to take off. So these 2 screws come off, and there's one more to come off. Okay, now that that's off, if you come up under here, there's a collar. The collar simply pulls out. It's like a locking nut. Once you pull that this way, you can let the whole thing drop. And the whole thing just drops right out like. Anyway, here's your thermostat that needs to come out. All this other stuff can stay for now. This is just a cover. This cover plate goes simply over this electronic portion or electric portion here, the fuel selector. And then this little hole here is for the knob on the front. So when you put it back, you just gotta fit it through that knob. There's only 2 wires that need to come off the thermostat. Those 2 wires are the black and the white and the black wire. So you just got to take those 2 wires off and just note where they come off of on the thermostat so you can put them back in their correct location. Once you've got it pulled off, all your electrical connections are off of the thermostat. And this is the tricky part here. This is where you have to pry this entire thermostat that way so that it'll slide off the gas fitting on this end and that end. But in order to do that, we got to move this entire brass fitting here forward. So this nut goes through the hole and comes out on this end. And how I do it is I usually push from this side. And I usually just pry it gently. And then I pry it off. Main thing is that this has moved that way so that this can actually back up and come out of this hole. So what I usually do is I usually try to wiggle it backwards that way so that I can get it back off of the fitting. This is where I'm trying to get it up at an angle or any way I can so I can get it off. There we go. So you see how the nut went right through that hole there? Now you've got a lot of space to maneuver this guy out. So you can simply pull him out like so. And here's a new thermostat. Get that out of the way right there. Take your cover off. Now the knob faces forward, so you can tell this is input, that's output towards the burner. Put this thermostat in. So the way I do it is put the thermostat in first, like so, right in that hole, line it up. Push it in. Using a screwdriver, I just kind of put a screwdriver in to get some leverage so I can push it onto that fitting. There, it's slid in right there. Then we take this guy. Usually we don't have to take this guy all the way out, we just got to make sure we don't damage that O-ring. Push this guy here through that little hole. And there's this, the hole's actually square, so you got to get the nut perfect or else it won't go through here. This guy has to go into the position or else it won't let you go through. I don't recommend taking this part out because you can damage the O-ring on this section here. Once you've got it in through this part here, all we need to do is force it into the thermostat. To do that, it takes a little bit of wiggling. Now that you've got that part in, you put your wire harness back over here. Right there. This capillary tube comes out of the way. If you look at the front under here, you've got all these parts there that line up with all your devices in the front. Fuel selector, thermostat, piezo, pilot light. Those guys all line up with each one of these. There's a flat spot on this that matches up with the thermostat. That's why we had to turn it off so that the front knob matches the actual position on the thermostat in the back. What we do is we take the cover and we put this guy back on. And just get it through the hole so that that comes out from the front. What I do is line it all back up, get that thermostat to fit into that. That's on. Almost. There you go. Once that's on, lock this guy back up in the hole right here. Push that back on so he's locked on. Take your Phillips. Put it back in the same hole. Your little fuel selector button or guy lines up with this little guy here, and he simply goes into place just like that. If you're not far enough in, this guy will be misaligned, so you got to be far enough in so it's lined up properly. Okay. Then you route your thermostat capillary tube back up. Feed it right through that hole, and on the other side, put it back under the retaining plate. And then when you're done, take your little clay, put it back right over that hole, and plug up that hole real nice so you don't get air escaping if that's cold air. That's it. On the input side of the thermostat, this is the output, this is the input. There's a filter in there. Looks like a little cigarette butt. This is what's supposed to catch all the dust and debris, but instead of catching dust and debris, it gets saturated with wax. So it just sits in this little plastic retainer, and this guy just gets shoved in. But once you got that hole plugged up with wax and debris, then the thermostat doesn't operate so well in gas mode, and it'll only work in electric mode, which doesn't care if this is plugged up, because it's going to heat the cooling unit using the electric element and not this gas flowing through here that goes to the burner. So this just goes back in and just gets pushed in gently. It goes to the bottom, and then it just seats itself at the bottom. It can't go any further in, and that's what usually gets plugged with wax. And that's why these thermostats fall up in Hawaii, because of the wax. And they start cooling only in electric but not in gas, because this is already saturated with wax. It gets into the thermostat, and then it fouls it up, and then it's no longer repairable. It's not repairable. You just replace the entire thermostat. And that's what we've usually found in Kona, is that the thermostats will get fouled up from wax in the propane, and then that causes insufficient cooling in the unit. Alright, thanks.